Hello, this is Dr. Michael McCarthy. Today we're going to talk about the data mining process. But first, because we are data scientists, we have to talk about the scientific method. Many people feel that data scientists should follow the scientific method like all other scientists. On the whole, this is a good practice, but there are some who do not necessarily follow the scientific method. How does the scientific method look in data science? This is the knowledge discovery and databases process, also known as KDD. This process was identified a while ago, but captures the overall method. I do not prefer this process map because it focuses too much on the data work and very little on the context, which is very important in any analysis. This is the cross-industry standard process for data mining. It is similar to the KDD. I like this process map better because it shows the iterative nature of the method. I also like this process because the modeling and evaluation often get the most credit, but it is the data understanding and data preparation that are so crucial to the process. Something that is underemphasized is the data visualization. Helping non-data scientists understand key findings is very important. Let me give you an example of the process. Here's an example of the CRISP-DM process with my experience researching the creative class in the United States. The creative class is an idea that began with Richard Florida. He saw how creativity began to be the center of the economic engine rather than the traditional components of land, labor, and capital. The creative class are those whose work is to create meaningful new forms. So what is a new form? As Florida puts it, is anything that is created. For example, a new book, painting, or computer app, to even a new financial or business technique. We start with understanding. This chart shows percentage of the workforce who are in creative occupations. It is roughly 30%. But workers in creative occupations generate 47% of the total wages in the United States. You can see how counties with a higher percentage of the creative class have a competitive advantage. Here you can see how the creative class generally had a much lower unemployment rate than the service or working classes during the Great Recession from 2007 to 2009. So the creative class is important to the local and regional economies. Let's take a look at the data. The next step in the CRISP-DM process is data understanding. So who is officially considered a member of the creative class? Florida's peer-reviewed definition of the creative class is based on the Standard Occupational Classifications, or SOCs, that are defined by the Bureau of Labor Statistics and used by the Census Bureau. If you notice, Florida uses standard occupational titles with one exception. The high-end sales and sales management occupations have no explicit match in the standard occupational classifications, so they are excluded from the definition. With the high-end sales and sales management occupations removed, the creative class measure is correlated with Florida's proprietary measure of the creative class at greater than 96%. The scale for analysis are the megapolitan areas in the United States, because they are potentially the most important scale of economic analysis. 63% of the US population and 71% of the gross domestic product in 2010 are in the megapolitan areas, even though the megapolitan areas consist of only 654 of the 3,109 counties in the contiguous 48 states, or just 17% of the landmass. The most robust conceptualization of the megapolitan areas in the United States are from these two scholars, Nelson and Lang. Now we know a lot of the context for our research. Let's look at the research question. My research studied the key drivers of economic development in the United States, the creative class, and a scale that represents the core area of economic output, the megapolitan areas. The research attempts to answer the research question: how is the original definition of the creative class distributed by megapolitan county, and what social economic variables best explains this distribution? Now let's take a look at some of the data. Here's a list of the 20 independent variables I used in the regression modeling. Like the creative class dependent variable, the data source for most of these variables is the Census Bureau, where there's some challenging preparation needed. Namely, the data is based on counties, but there are actually a few new counties made and some counties that went away. The population growth rate was easy to find for all the counties except those that had changes. Additionally, Missouri, Maryland, and Virginia had independent cities, and they are not part of a county. New York City is an interesting anomaly. It is made up of 5 counties. Lastly, the Census Bureau does not report data at the megapolitan area level, so it required some special puzzling together. I developed this list based on extensive creative class literature and what I thought could add valuable insights. So to begin the analysis, we must first understand where the creative class is and where they are not. This is part of my exploratory data analysis. What you see here are the top 20 and bottom 10 megapolitan counties for the percentage of the workforce in the creative class. Here you see the major urban counties in the top 10. The District of Columbia is Washington, D.C., and the New York County is Manhattan. An unexpected finding was the dominance of counties that are around Washington, D.C. A closer inspection will find that most of the top 20 are not major urban centers, but counties around major urban centers that are commuter counties where creative class live, or counties with edge cities where the creative class live and work. 9 of the top 10 megapolitan counties are around Washington, D.C. This is a window into the bias of the data. It was reported by where the creative class workers live and not where they work. Douglas County is a commuter county on the south side of Denver. Somerset County in northern New Jersey with an edge city near New York City. Collin County is on the northwest side of Dallas and has the city of Plano. The megapolitan counties at the bottom of the list are generally fringe in nature, where the majority of the creative class are made up of workers in education, medical and business professionals, with almost no workers in the arts or technology sectors. Let's see where the creative class are in the non-megapolitan counties. The first impression of the creative class rankings for the non-megapolitan counties is the presence of 15 counties with low populations. These counties feature prominently because a few extra or fewer creative class workers substantially affect the percentage. Los Alamos County is home to a major nuclear research facility. Albemarle County surrounds the University of Virginia. Williamson County and Hamilton County are commuter counties for Nashville and Indianapolis, respectively. Tompkins County, New York is a college county with Cornell and the University of Ithaca. Like the megapolitan counties ranked at the bottom of the creative class rankings, the non-megapolitan counties are fringe with almost no technology and arts workers whatsoever. This map shows the disproportionate shares of the creative class in the study area. Note the megapolitan areas are outlined in black. On average, for all 3,109 counties, 33.66% of the workforce is in the creative class. To give you a quick frame of reference, Utica College is here. This is also your first primer in data visualization. Up till now, I have used words and tables with partial results, but this map begins to tell the whole story. Here's another map, but it shows the hotspot clusters in shades of red and the cold spot clusters in shades of blue. White is not significant. First, it's important to identify the expected clusters in the megapolitan areas. Also, it's important to identify the megapolitan areas without a creative class cluster. What is truly unexpected was the great cold spot in the southeast and the great hot spot in the Great Plains. The Great Plains hotspot and the southeast cold spot are primarily non-megapolitan counties and begs the question, what's going on here? The cold spot is in the Midwest is somewhat unexpected, but if you review the literature, it confirms a portion of Kotkin's resurgent heartland theory in the Great Plains due to the fracking boom. Also, the creative class cold spot looks a lot like Kotkin's southeast manufacturing belt. We have pretty good understanding of where the creative class is and where it isn't. Let's model it to see what are the predictor variables that explain this distribution. The creative class model for the 654 megapolitan counties yielded very interesting findings. Model 2 is the selected model for the creative class, predicting nearly 87% of the variance in the megapolitan counties. The bachelor's degree and average wages predictor variables have a positive relationship with the creative class, meaning that when they increase, so does the creative class. The relative strength of each predictor variable is reported by the standardized estimate. And it's interesting that the percent bachelor degree is nearly twice as influential in the model as the average wages predictor variable. It's important to note that the bachelor's degree independent variable alone in Model 1 had an R-square of over 0.83. This is important to remember as we discuss other models for other dependent variables. Now, here's the distribution of the creative class by non-megapolitan county. The model for the creative class dependent variable for non-megapolitan counties explains over 54% of the variance, with 3 predictor variables. The bachelor's degree variable has a positive relationship with the creative class for the non-megapolitan counties, just like the previous model. The average wages dependent variable is not represented and they're replaced with the population growth and the gross rent as a percent of income variable, which both have a negative association with the creative class for the non-megapolitan counties. Now we have modeled the creative class. Let's evaluate the model to see what it tells us. The modeling is pretty good. The megapolitan model explains 85% of the variance. The model for non-megapolitan counties explained over half the variance. The non-megapolitan model might not sound as good, but is better than a coin flip. There's also some interesting findings that cause us to iterate on the data mining process. The non-core counties dominate the megapolitan rankings. We should dig more there. Maybe find data by where people work. Washington, D.C. and its surrounding cities and counties probably need a deeper dive to understand what is going on. Lastly, each county is treated as a data point regardless of the population. The low population counties in the non-megapolitan model might need to be weighted. Let's check the steps of the data mining process. So here we are. We started with understanding the creative class and megapolitan areas. We understood the data used to define the creative class and the independent variables. We prepared the data, the model, and then modeled. We just completed the evaluation of the model's strengths and weaknesses. If the model was found to have value, then it goes into development. Or it goes back to the drawing board for another iteration. Any data scientist, any researcher, any developer will recognize the iterative nature of the process. If it does not go back for another iteration in the process, then that's okay. For knowledge to come from the data, we must work and we must iterate. I look forward to any questions or comments you might have. Thanks for listening and have a great day.